A family disappears after visiting a mountain cabin, but 2 weeks later, a drone captures unexpected movement inside. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Jessica Parker's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as she turned onto the narrow gravel road leading to the Wilson cabin. Her stomach had been in knots for the past 2 weeks, 14 endless days since her sister Emma, brother-in-law Derek, and their 3 children had vanished without a trace. She parked in the overgrown driveway, killing the engine but remaining seated. The missing person flyers scattered across her passenger seat stared back at her, 5 smiling faces frozen in time. Emma's bright eyes, Derek's confident smile, the twins Ethan and Noah's mischievous grins, and little Lily's innocent face. A family portrait taken just 3 months ago, now plastered across town with the word "missing" emblazoned above them. Jessica closed her eyes, recalling her last normal conversation with Emma. A mundane Tuesday afternoon phone call about weekend plans. Emma had sounded happy, talking about the upcoming family retreat at their cabin, where they planned to disconnect from technology and enjoy nature for a long weekend. Nothing in her voice had suggested trouble or fear. 3 days later, they were gone. The local police had practically given up. People sometimes choose to start over elsewhere, Detective Simmons had told her just yesterday, his tone suggesting the case was already gathering dust. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. The car gone, they just left. Emma would never abandon her life without telling me, Jessica had insisted, her voice rising. She wouldn't leave her pediatric practice, her patients, her home, and she would never cut contact with me. The FBI was supposedly investigating other leads, but Jessica could see the gradual reduction in resources allocated to the case with each passing day. She finally stepped out of the car, the cool autumn air filling her lungs. Jessica was no ordinary sister. As an investigative journalist with 15 years of experience, she'd uncovered corruption, solved cold cases, and followed leads across countries. Now, she was turning those skills toward finding her own family. "Officer Daniels," she greeted the young policeman stationed at the cabin's entrance, pulling out her press credentials. "I'm here to collect some personal items for the family." The officer nodded, already familiar with her from previous visits. "Just sign here, Miss Parker. I'll be outside if you need anything." Jessica stepped into the cabin's living room, immediately struck by the unnatural tidiness. Emma had 3 children under 10. The house should have shown signs of hasty packing, of a family's chaotic exit. Instead, everything was perfectly arranged, as if waiting for a real estate showing. The living room was spotless, books aligned on shelves, throw pillows perfectly positioned on the couch, not a toy in sight. Jessica moved methodically through the space, photographing everything with her professional camera. In the children's bedroom, the military precision continued. 3 beds made without a wrinkle, stuffed animals arranged in neat rows, toy bins organized by type and color. Emma had often joked about controlled chaos being her parenting style. This level of organization was completely out of character. "No mother with 3 kids leaves a house this clean before a normal trip," Jessica muttered, opening drawers filled with neatly folded clothes. The kitchen told the same story. Dishes cleaned and stacked in cabinets, counters wiped down, even food in the refrigerator, some of it now spoiled. Jessica documented everything, her unease growing. Most disturbing of all were the family's passports, still in the desk drawer in Derek's office. If they had planned to leave the country, to start over as the detective suggested, why leave these behind? Jessica's phone rang, breaking the eerie silence. The caller ID displayed Kyle Richards, a forensic technician from the county office and a friend who had agreed to help her unofficially. "Please tell me you found something," Jessica answered. "I contracted that drone service you suggested," Kyle replied. We did a thermal scan of the property and surrounding woods. You won't believe what we found. I'm sending the video now." Jessica's phone pinged with an incoming file. She opened the video, squinting at the infrared footage of the cabin taken from above. Most of the structure appeared in cool blues and greens, indicating no heat signatures, until a shadow moved in what appeared to be the master bedroom. "Wait, what was that?" She rewound the footage, playing it again in slow motion. A distinct human-shaped heat signature moved across the room, then disappeared from view. "The cabin is supposed to be empty," Kyle said through the phone. "That footage was taken yesterday afternoon while the police were changing shifts." Jessica froze the image on the figure, zooming in as far as the resolution allowed. It appeared to be a man, but the face was too blurred to identify. "I need to check this out," she said, heading toward the master bedroom. "Jessica, wait!" Kyle started, but she had already ended the call. She was halfway up the stairs when a deep voice called from the entrance. "Jessica, what are you doing here?" Sheriff Michael Reynolds stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. A childhood friend of Derek's, Reynolds had initially been passionate about finding the family, but lately, his enthusiasm had waned noticeably. "I'm gathering some personal items," Jessica replied, descending the stairs. "What brings you here, Michael?" The sheriff removed his hat, revealing graying hair. "Officer Daniels called. Said you've been here almost an hour taking pictures. Jessica, we've talked about this. You need to leave the investigation to us." "To you?" Jessica couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Your department has already written them off as voluntary disappearances. Look at this." She thrust her phone into his hand, playing the drone footage. Reynolds' expression transformed as he watched, professional alertness replacing his earlier condescension. He immediately grabbed his radio. "This is Sheriff Reynolds. I need backup at the Wilson cabin immediately. Possible intruder." He drew his weapon, motioning for Jessica to stay behind him. "Anyone else been here today?" "Just me and Officer Daniels." Reynolds nodded toward the stairs. "Stay here." "Not a chance," Jessica replied, following him up. The search of the upper floor revealed nothing. No intruder, no signs of recent occupation besides Jessica's own presence. The mysterious figure had vanished. "Could be a technical glitch with the drone," Reynolds suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "In the shape of a person? Moving deliberately?" Jessica challenged. Their search continued through each room, finding nothing until they reached the master bedroom. Jessica noticed the bookshelf against the far wall had been moved slightly, revealing a discrepancy in the wooden paneling behind it. "Michael, look at this," she called, pushing the bookshelf further aside. Her fingers found a small indentation in the wall, and when she pressed it, a hidden compartment clicked open. Inside lay an old tape recorder, wrapped in cloth embroidered with a strange circular symbol. "I've been through this room a dozen times," Reynolds said, clearly disturbed. "That wasn't there before." "Or you missed it," Jessica countered, carefully lifting the device. It was an analog recorder, the kind that used cassette tapes, at least 20 years old, but maintained in perfect condition. "That symbol?" Reynolds leaned closer. "I've seen something like it before, in Derek's grandfather's things." Jessica examined the recorder, finding it was loaded, with a tape. A small label on the side bore a single date, written just one day before the family disappeared. "We should turn this over to the FBI," Reynolds said, reaching for it. Jessica pulled it away. "After we listen to it." Before Reynolds could object further, she pressed play. The mechanism whirred to life, and after a moment of static, Derek's voice filled the room, low, trembling, and unmistakably terrified. "If you're hearing this, it's probably too late for us. The voices from the forest won't stop. The truth about my grandfather. The pact he made." Jessica sat frozen, her face drained of color as Derek's trembling voice played again from the old tape recorder. Sheriff Reynolds stood beside her. his expression hardening with each disturbing word that echoed through the cabin's master bedroom. "The voices from the forest call to me every night now," Derek's recording continued. "They speak of the ancestral pact, of the debt that must be paid. My grandfather knew. He tried to warn me when I inherited this land, but I didn't listen. Now they've chosen us, chosen our family. I can feel them watching the children." Jessica rewound the tape and played it again, then a third time, transcribing every word into her notebook with shaking hands. The references to forest voices and an ancestral pact sent chills down her spine. "This isn't evidence," Reynolds finally said, rubbing his temples. "This is the rambling of a man in psychological distress." Jessica looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Reynolds hesitated before pulling out his phone. "I didn't want to cloud the investigation with this, but..." He pulled up a document and handed her the phone. Derek had been seeing Dr. Levine at County General. Psychiatric consultations starting 3 months ago. Jessica scanned the medical record, her journalist's mind automatically filing away details. Complaints of insomnia, auditory hallucinations, increasing paranoia. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she demanded. "Doctor-patient confidentiality. I only got access yesterday through a court order." Reynolds' eyes softened. "Jessica, I think Derek may have experienced a psychotic break. He might have convinced Emma they were in danger and what? Murdered his family, ran away? Neither makes sense with what we're seeing." Jessica gestured around the immaculate room. "And it certainly doesn't explain that figure on the thermal imaging." Reynolds had no answer for that. By the next morning, Jessica had transformed the cabin's living room into an investigation board that would put any police department to shame. Maps of the surrounding forest covered one wall, with pins marking locations mentioned in Derek's journals. Photos of the family formed a timeline on another wall, while a third displayed printouts of Derek's medical records and transcripts of his tape recording. Kyle arrived around noon, carrying specialized equipment in hard-shell cases. "I analyzed the recorder," he said, setting up his laptop on the dining table. "It's an old Sony model, but well-maintained. Based on the tape wear and magnetic signature analysis, I'd estimate the recording was made the night before they disappeared." Jessica nodded, pinning this information to her timeline. "What about the thermal imaging? Any chance it was a glitch?" "None," Kyle said firmly. "That was a human-sized heat signature, moving with purpose. Someone was in this house." While Kyle set up more sophisticated surveillance cameras around the property, Jessica drove to interview the nearest neighbors, though near was relative in this remote area. The Johnson family lived 2 miles down the road. "We saw Derek about a week before they disappeared," Mrs. Johnson told Jessica as they sat on her front porch. "He was walking alone along the road, talking to himself. I called out to him, but he didn't seem to hear me. It wasn't like him at all." "Did you mention this to the police?" Jessica asked. "Of course, that sheriff friend of his came by, seemed very interested in Derek's behavior." Back at the cabin, Sheriff Reynolds was waiting with a manila envelope. "These just came in," he said, handing her the envelope once she'd parked. "Derek's complete psychiatric records. I had to call in favors to get these." Jessica spread the documents across the kitchen counter. The clinical language painted a disturbing picture. Patient reports persistent auditory hallucinations described as whispering voices, originating from the wooded areas surrounding his property. Another note read, "Increasing paranoid ideation centered around family safety. Patient believes he is being watched by entities in the forest." "This still doesn't explain everything," Jessica insisted, though doubt had begun to creep into her voice. "It explains a lot," Reynolds countered. "A man suffering from paranoid delusions, believing his family is in danger, takes drastic action." Jessica was about to argue when her fingers, running along the bottom edge of the bedroom dresser, caught on something. Kneeling down, she found a loose floorboard beneath the furniture. Prying it up revealed a hidden space containing an old leather-bound book. "What is that?" Reynolds asked, coming closer. "It looks like a journal." Jessica carefully opened the aged volume. It belonged to Derek's grandfather, William Wilson. The journal contained detailed writings spanning decades, but what immediately caught Jessica's attention were the drawings, intricate sketches of the same circular symbol found on the tape recorder cloth. Scattered throughout were references to forest visitors and the bargain made in blood. "I need to check something," Jessica said, grabbing the journal and heading outside. Using coordinates she'd found on a dog-eared page, Jessica ventured into the woods surrounding the property. Reynolds reluctantly accompanied her, hand resting on his holstered weapon. After 30 minutes of hiking through increasingly dense forest, they emerged into a small clearing. Jessica gasped. Arranged in a perfect circle were moss-covered stones, each bearing faint carvings that matched the symbol from the journal and tape recorder. "Michael, do you recognize this place?" she asked. The sheriff shook his head, but Jessica noticed a flicker of something. Recognition, fear, cross his face. "We should head back," he said abruptly. "It'll be dark soon." That night, Jessica installed the surveillance cameras Kyle had provided, positioning them to cover every entrance and major room in the cabin. She took the small guest bedroom for herself, determined to document any further unexplained occurrences. At 2:17 a.m., she was awakened by children's laughter. Instantly alert, Jessica grabbed her phone and followed the sound toward the children's bedroom. The surveillance app showed no movement in the house, yet the soft giggles continued, now seeming to come from all directions at once. She pushed open the door to the kids' room, flipping on the light. The bedroom remained perfectly organized as before, except for one detail that made her blood run cold. On Lily's bed sat her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Flopsy. Jessica distinctly remembered Emma telling her that Lily had been clutching that rabbit when they left for the cabin. It should have disappeared with them. With shaking hands, Jessica called Kyle. "I need you here now," she whispered. "Bring your equipment. Something's happening." Kyle arrived 40 minutes later, his car loaded with more sophisticated monitoring devices. Jessica led him straight to the children's room, explaining about the laughter and the rabbit. But when they entered the room, Mr. Flopsy was gone. "It was right there," Jessica insisted, pointing to the empty bed. Pink rabbit, floppy ears, patch on the left foot. Emma sewed it herself. Kyle reviewed the footage from the newly installed cameras. "Nothing shows anyone entering or leaving this room, Jessica. Not even you." "That's impossible. Check again." They reviewed the footage 3 more times. The cameras had recorded Jessica entering the room alone, then standing still for several minutes, staring at an empty bed, before calling Kyle. "You need to consider the possibility that Derek wasn't the only one experiencing psychological distress," Kyle said gently. "Sleep deprivation, emotional trauma. They can cause hallucinations." "I know what I saw," Jessica snapped. "And I know what I heard." "Or maybe there's another explanation," Kyle suggested, his scientific mind working. "What if Derek really did have some kind of breakdown and is now playing mind games? Maybe he's hidden the family somewhere and is watching, manipulating the scene. That would mean he's been in and out of this cabin without being detected," Jessica said, considering the possibility. "It would mean he somehow evaded the police search, the FBI, and our cameras. It's more plausible than... what, ghosts? Supernatural forest entities?" Kyle raised an eyebrow. Jessica didn't have a good answer. That night, after Kyle had left to analyze the new data, Jessica decided to stay in the cabin alone. She'd taken a brief nap earlier, but was determined to remain awake, vigilant for any further unexplained phenomena. At precisely 3:33 a.m., she jolted upright in the guest bed at the sound of children giggling again. This time, it clearly came from outside. Jessica grabbed her flashlight and phone, rushing to the back door. In the moonlight, she caught glimpses of what appeared to be 3 small silhouettes running toward the tree line. "Ethan! Noah, Lily!" she called out, her heart leaping into her throat as she ran after them in bare feet, not bothering with shoes. The figures moved with unnatural speed, always just ahead of her flashlight beam. Jessica followed desperately, calling their names, branches scratching her arms and face as she plunged deeper into the dark forest. Suddenly, her foot caught on an exposed root, sending her sprawling face first into the damp earth. The fall knocked the wind from her lungs, and she lay there for a moment, gasping. When she finally managed to stand, brushing soil from her pajamas, Jessica realized she was completely alone in the darkness. No children, no giggling, just the normal sounds of the nighttime forest. Her phone showed no signal, and the time displayed was exactly 3:33 a.m., the same as when she'd left the cabin, despite what felt like several minutes of pursuit. Disoriented and shivering, Jessica used her flashlight to navigate back toward the cabin. By the time she emerged from the tree line, rain had begun to fall, quickly becoming a downpour that soaked her to the skin. She stumbled up the back steps, yanking open the door and collapsing in the kitchen. As she caught her breath, something on the window above the sink caught her eye. The glass had fogged from the temperature difference between the rain-chilled exterior and the warmer kitchen. On this foggy canvas, drawn with small fingerprints, was a message that made Jessica's heart stop. "Help, Mommy. She doesn't want to come." Jessica transformed the Wilson cabin into her impromptu operations center, covering every available wall space with evidence and theories. 3 days had passed since discovering the fingerprint message on the window, and she'd barely slept, dividing her time between analyzing Derek's recordings and mapping out potential search areas in the surrounding forest. 3 generations, she muttered, replaying Derek's recording for what must have been the 30th time. His voice, strained and fearful, filled the otherwise silent living room. "My grandfather participated in rituals with the ancient inhabitants of these lands. The pact requires that every 3 generations, an entire family must return. I fought against it. But the visions, the voices, they became unbearable." Jessica paused the tape, adding another note to her growing transcription. The reference to ancient inhabitants had sent her down a research rabbit hole about Native American tribes that once populated this region, though historical records were frustratingly sparse. Sheriff Reynolds had dismissed the recording outright when she'd played it for him again yesterday. "This is just evidence of Derek's deteriorating mental state," he'd insisted. "A man experiencing delusions about ancestral pacts and forest voices who took drastic action with his family." The sheriff's theory had gained traction among the investigators when Derek's psychiatric records revealed his secret consultations. But Jessica couldn't reconcile this explanation with the immaculate condition of the cabin, the mysterious figure on the thermal imaging, or the children's laughter she'd heard with her own ears. Against Reynolds' explicit orders to stay away from the forest, Jessica ventured out again the next morning, following coordinates she'd extracted from William Wilson's journal. The grandfather's diary contained dozens of entries about meeting places and thin spots between worlds. After hiking for nearly 2 hours, Jessica discovered a small clearing, with stones arranged in a circular pattern, identical to the symbol carved into the secret compartment. The moss-covered stones bore faint markings that appeared to be a combination of English letters and symbols she couldn't identify. Jessica photographed everything meticulously, then sat in the center of the circle, flipping through the journal for any clues about the site's significance. The wind whispered through the trees, occasionally sounding almost like whispered words, a phenomenon she attributed to exhaustion and suggestion rather than anything supernatural. That evening, while digging through town records about the region's history, Jessica was startled by a thump from upstairs. She froze, listening intently. Another thump followed, definitely coming from the children's bedroom. Her heart hammering, Jessica grabbed her flashlight, the only weapon within reach, and slowly climbed the stairs. The surveillance app on her phone showed no movement in the house, yet the sounds continued, a scraping noise like furniture being moved. Jessica pushed open the door to the children's room, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. What she saw made her gasp. The previously immaculate room was now in disarray. Dresser drawers hung open, toys scattered across the floor, bedsheets rumpled. On Lily's bed lay her pink stuffed rabbit, Mr. Flopsy, the same one that had appeared and disappeared days earlier. With shaking hands, Jessica called Kyle. "I need you to come document this. Now, bring your equipment." While waiting for Kyle, Jessica photographed everything, careful not to disturb any potential evidence. The rabbit sat exactly in the center of Lily's bed, its glass eyes seeming to follow her movements around the room. Kyle arrived 40 minutes later with his forensic kit. "This better be good. I had to cancel dinner with Sarah." "It is," Jessica assured him, leading him upstairs. When they entered the children's bedroom, however, Jessica stopped short. The room was once again perfectly organized, drawers closed, toys neatly arranged, beds pristinely made, and Mr. Flopsy was gone. "What the—" Jessica rushed to Lily's bed, running her hands over the undisturbed comforter. "It was right here. The whole room was messed up, like someone had been searching for something." Kyle set down his equipment bag with a sigh. "Jessica, I think we need to talk about what's happening." "I know what you're going to say," she snapped. "That I'm sleep-deprived, that I'm projecting my grief, that I'm having hallucinations like Derek." "You need to consider the possibility," Kyle said gently. "Derek suffered a psychotic break and may have harmed his family. Now he's playing psychological games with you." "By what? Sneaking past your surveillance cameras? Rearranging an entire room and vanishing a stuffed animal in the 40 minutes it took you to drive here?" Jessica ran her hands through her hair in frustration. "Or something else is happening here," she continued, her voice quieter now. "Something that doesn't fit neatly into our understanding of reality." Kyle looked uncomfortable. "Jessica, you haven't slept properly in days. You're emotionally invested in a way that clouds judgment. Let me take you back to your apartment. Get some rest, and we can approach this fresh tomorrow." "I'm not leaving," Jessica insisted. "Not when I'm finally making progress." That night, Jessica set up a makeshift bed on the living room couch, positioning herself where she could see both the staircase and the front door. She kept the surveillance app open on her tablet, determined to catch any movement. Despite her resolve, exhaustion eventually won out. She drifted into a fitful sleep, filled with dreams of children running through endless woods, always just beyond her reach. At 3:33 a.m., Jessica jerked awake to the sound of children's laughter. Not the faint, distant giggling she'd heard before, but clear, joyful sounds coming from just outside the back door. Fully alert now, Jessica grabbed her flashlight and phone. The surveillance app showed nothing unusual, but the laughter continued, punctuated by what sounded like playful whispers. She moved quietly to the back door, peering through the window. In the moonlit yard, she could make out 3 small silhouettes dancing near the tree line. Their movements were fluid, almost unnaturally graceful for children. "Ethan, Noah, Lily," Jessica called, her voice catching in her throat as she pushed open the door. The 3 figures stopped their play, turning toward her in unison. Though their faces were in shadow, Jessica felt their eyes upon her. One of the smaller figures, Lily, raised an arm, beckoning her forward. Jessica stepped into the yard, her bare feet cold against the dewy grass. "It's Aunt Jessica," she called, softly moving toward them. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The children retreated as she approached, moving backward toward the forest without turning around. Their laughter grew more insistent, clearly inviting her to follow. Without hesitation, Jessica pursued them into the woods. The children moved with impossible speed, always visible but never quite reachable. They led her deeper than she'd ventured before, along paths that seemed to appear just as she needed them. "Please stop. I just want to help you," Jessica called, her lungs burning from the exertion. Suddenly her foot caught on something, a root or stone, sending her sprawling hard onto the forest floor. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs, and for a moment, she lay stunned, unable to move. When Jessica finally pushed herself up, spitting dirt from her mouth, the forest had fallen completely silent. No laughter, no movement, just the ordinary sounds of night creatures. Her flashlight had rolled away in the fall, its beam illuminating nothing but ordinary trees. Jessica retrieved it, sweeping the light around desperately, but the children were gone. Completely alone in the darkness, she checked her phone. 3:33 a.m. The same time she'd left the house, despite what felt like at least 20 minutes of pursuit. More disturbing still, her phone showed no signal, the GPS unable to pinpoint her location. Jessica turned in a slow circle, trying to get her bearings. The forest looked identical in every direction, with no sign of the path she'd followed. As panic began to rise in her chest, the first drops of rain splashed against her face. Within seconds, a downpour began, drenching her thin pajamas and obscuring visibility even further. Jessica stumbled through the woods, using her rapidly failing flashlight to avoid the worst obstacles. After what seemed like hours, but could have been minutes, she spotted a faint glow through the trees, the cabin's porch light, a beacon in the darkness. Soaking wet, and shivering violently, Jessica burst through the back door into the kitchen. Water pooled around her feet as she leaned against the counter, trying to process what had just happened. As her breathing steadied, Jessica noticed the kitchen window had fogged over from the temperature difference between the rain-chilled exterior and the warmer interior. Her eyes widened as she saw, written in the condensation with small fingerprints, a new message. "Help Mommy. She doesn't want to come." The same message from days ago, reappearing as if to emphasize its importance. Jessica approached the window, studying the childlike writing. The fingerprints were small, child-sized, and pressed with enough force to leave clear impressions. She took several photos, then traced her own finger along the writing. "I'm trying," she whispered. "Tell me how to help her." The next morning, Kyle found Jessica huddled at the kitchen table surrounded by printouts, her hair still damp from the night's adventure. "You look terrible," he observed, setting down a thermos of coffee. "Thanks," Jessica replied dryly, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I saw them last night, Kyle. The children. They were right outside and they led me into the forest." Kyle's expression grew concerned. "Jessica, I know what you're going to say," she interrupted. "But this wasn't a dream or hallucination. Look." She showed him the photos of the fingerprint message on the window. Kyle examined the images, his scientific mind visibly working to find a rational explanation. This could be condensation forming in the same pattern as before, following microscopic residue from the original writing. "That's a stretch even for you," Jessica said. "You need to consider the possibility that Derek wasn't having a psychotic break. What if he was experiencing something real? Something that science doesn't yet understand? Like what? Forest spirits? Interdimensional beings?" Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Jessica, listen to yourself." While they argued, Sheriff Reynolds arrived with a search warrant. "We're expanding our investigation," he explained, avoiding Jessica's eyes. "Need to check some things in the basement we might have missed." Jessica observed Reynolds and his deputies closely as they worked, noting how the sheriff seemed to be searching for something specific rather than conducting a general investigation. When they finally left, empty-handed and visibly frustrated, Jessica returned to William Wilson's journal, focusing on entries from exactly 33 years before Derek's family disappeared. What she found sent a chill down her spine. "The third generation approaches," William had written. "I pray my grandson will be spared. But the forest has already marked him. I hear them speaking his name in the wind. As Jessica stared at the faded handwriting, a realization struck her. She rushed to check birth records, property deeds, and newspaper archives. Every 33 years, dating back nearly a century, a Wilson family member had either died under mysterious circumstances or disappeared entirely. This wasn't random. It was cyclical, predictable. That evening, while Jessica was piecing together this generational pattern, she was startled by a knock at the door. Sheriff Reynolds stood on the porch, accompanied by 2 medics. "Jessica, we need to talk," he said, his expression grave. "Kyle called me. He's concerned about your well-being." "You betrayed me," she accused Kyle, who stood awkwardly behind the sheriff, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm worried about you," Kyle responded quietly. "You're not sleeping. You're chasing children through the forest at night. You're seeing messages that disappear. Because something is happening here." Jessica backed into the house. "Something none of you want to acknowledge." "We're taking you in for a psychological evaluation," Reynolds said firmly. "Just for 72 hours to make sure you're okay." Jessica ran for the stairs, locking herself in the master bedroom as the men called after her. "They're alive," she shouted through the door. "They're trapped somewhere between worlds." When the medical team finally broke down the door, they found an empty room. The window was intact and locked from the inside. On the wall, Jessica had covered every inch with intricate drawings of the circular symbol, and in the center, written in what appeared to be her own blood, were the words, "I know how to bring them back." Sterile white light pierced Jessica's consciousness as she blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The hospital bed beneath her felt unnaturally rigid, the thin blanket providing little comfort against the room's clinical chill. Restraint cuffs secured her wrists to the bed rails, soft but unyielding. "Jessica Parker?" A middle-aged man in a white coat approached, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Nichols. You're at Pinewood Psychiatric Hospital. Do you remember how you got here?" Jessica stared silently at the ceiling, memories flooding back in disjointed fragments. The bedroom wall covered in symbols, the sheriff and Kyle at the door, the medics breaking in, but nothing explaining how she'd been found when the room had no exit. "You were brought in 3 days ago exhibiting signs of acute psychosis," Dr. Nichols continued, undeterred by her silence. "Sheriff Reynolds found you unconscious in the bedroom. You had used a letter opener to cut your finger and draw elaborate symbols on the wall." Jessica's eyes darted to her bandaged index finger. She had no memory of doing that. "The stress of your family's disappearance, combined with severe sleep deprivation, appears to have triggered a psychotic episode," Dr. Nichols explained, making notes on his clipboard. "We've started you on a mild antipsychotic regimen, which should help clear your thinking." Jessica remained silent, watching the shadows on the far wall of her room. They seemed to move when no one was looking directly at them, stretching and contracting like living things. For the next 3 days, Jessica maintained her catatonic facade. She accepted medication without resistance, though often managed to hide the pills under her tongue, spitting them into the toilet when alone. She observed everything: the hospital routines, the staff changes, the security measures, and most importantly, she watched the shadows that danced on her walls when the staff thought she was sleeping. On the 4th day, Dr. Nichols changed tactics. "Let's talk about Emma," he suggested during their morning session. "You were close growing up?" Jessica's eyes flickered to his face, the first acknowledgement she'd given him since her arrival. "Emma's 3 years younger than you, correct? Your parents died when you were teenagers. You practically raised her." "She has a strawberry birthmark behind her left ear," Jessica said suddenly, her voice hoarse from disuse. "No one knows about it except me and Derek. It's shaped like a crescent moon." Dr. Nichols leaned forward. "Why is that important to you right now?" Because when they find a body they claim is Emma's, I'll know if it's really her. Jessica's piercing gaze met his. But they won't find bodies, Doctor, because they're not dead. Where do you think they are, Jessica? Somewhere between worlds, she whispered, eyes drifting back to the shadows on the wall. In a place that exists alongside ours, but follows different rules. Every 33 years, the barrier thins. Dr. Nichols made notes without comment. Would you be willing to try hypnosis, Jessica? It might help us access memories that could explain what happened at the cabin. Jessica considered this carefully. Hypnosis might actually reveal something useful, if not to the doctor, then to her. Fine, she agreed. During the hypnosis session that afternoon, Jessica described visions she hadn't consciously remembered. A luminous forest, where gravity felt different, trees that seemed to communicate through their root systems, and shadowy figures that moved too quickly to properly see. Have you been to this forest before? Dr. Nichols asked, his voice maintaining the even cadence used in hypnotherapy. No, Jessica responded, her voice distant. But the children are there. They're adapting faster than Emma. Derek has already surrendered to it. Surrendered to what? The transformation. The forest changes you to survive there. The children's eyes are different now. Dr. Nichols ended the session shortly after, looking troubled by her descriptions. That evening, an elderly woman with wispy white hair approached Jessica in the day room. She glanced nervously at the staff before sitting beside her. I heard what you were saying in group therapy, the woman whispered. About the forest that exists alongside ours. About the 33-year cycle. Jessica studied the woman carefully. What do you know about it? They took my grandson in 1978. We were camping near Wilson Creek. The old woman's hands trembled as she spoke. Tommy wandered into the woods while I was cooking breakfast. I heard him laughing, talking to someone. When I called for him, he ran deeper in, like he was following something only he could see. Did anyone believe you? Jessica asked, already knowing the answer. They said I dozed off and he wandered away, drowned in the creek or was taken by an animal. Tears welled in the woman's rheumy eyes. But I know what I saw, and 3 days before it happened, my grandson kept drawing circles with strange markings inside, just like the ones they say you drew on that cabin wall. Before Jessica could ask more questions, an orderly approached, gently guiding the old woman back to her designated area. Mrs. Kellerman needs her medication, he explained to Jessica with a patronizing smile. That night, Jessica lay awake, processing this new information. If the old woman was telling the truth, it connected another disappearance to the same area, the same phenomena, at exactly the 33-year mark before the Wilson family vanished. The next morning, Jessica managed to access the patient lounge computer during recreation time. While the nurse was distracted helping another patient, she quickly searched for information about disappearances in the region. Though her time was limited, she found enough to confirm a pattern. Clusters of unexplained disappearances occurred in the area every 33 years, dating back to at least 1880. Dr. Nichols seemed pleased with Jessica's apparent progress during their next session. She had strategically begun to agree that stress and sleep deprivation had affected her judgment. I still believe something happened to Emma and her family, Jessica explained carefully. But I recognize that some of my experiences at the cabin might have been affected by my emotional state. That's a significant insight, Jessica. Dr. Nichols nodded approvingly. We often experience reality through the filter of our emotional needs. I think I'm ready to be discharged, Jessica suggested. I've been taking the medication, participating in group therapy. I'd like to get back to my life. Let's see how the next few days go, Dr. Nichols hedged. If your progress continues, we can discuss release early next week. That wouldn't be soon enough. Jessica had calculated the lunar cycle and realized the next full moon was approaching in just 2 days. According to William Wilson's journal, The barrier between worlds would be at its thinnest during the full moon. During visiting hours that afternoon, Kyle arrived looking uncomfortable and apologetic. "I'm sorry," he began as soon as they were seated in the visitors' lounge. "I was just worried about you. The things you were saying, the way you were acting." Jessica leaned forward, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "I need you to trust me one last time. There's a full moon tonight. It's our only chance." Kyle's expression shifted from remorse to concern. "Jessica, you need help. This obsession—" "It's not an obsession," she interrupted with a clarity that visibly surprised him. "It's the truth. Think about it. No bodies found, the cabin locked from the inside, the apparitions that surveillance equipment doesn't capture. How do you explain all that rationally?" She could see doubt flickering in Kyle's eyes. He was a scientist, committed to evidence and rational explanation, but the anomalies in the Wilson case defied conventional analysis. "Even if, and that's a massive if, something paranormal is happening," Kyle whispered. "What exactly do you think you can do about it?" The journal explains a ritual for opening the pathway during a full moon. "It's not magic, Kyle. It's about identifying where the barrier between worlds is thinnest and creating the right electromagnetic conditions to breach it." Jessica knew framing it in scientific terms would appeal to his analytical mind. "And if you're wrong, if Derek really did kill them all?" "Then I have nothing left to lose," she answered simply. That night, Jessica prepared carefully. She complained of nausea to the evening nurse, who brought her medication and left her to rest. Once alone, Jessica retrieved the homemade lockpick she'd fashioned from a twisted paperclip during craft therapy, waiting patiently for the 2 a.m. shift change. When the ward fell quiet, she skillfully picked the simple lock on her room door, a technique she'd learned while researching an article on prison security years earlier. Moving silently down the corridor, she used the same technique on the door leading to the staff locker room, where she quickly located street clothes approximately her size. Jessica made her way to the service exit, where Kyle had promised to be waiting with his car. True to his word, his sedan idled in the dark corner of the parking lot, furthest from security cameras. "I can't believe I'm doing this," he muttered as she slipped into the passenger seat. "This is a felony, you know." "Only if we get caught," Jessica replied, adrenaline coursing through her system. "Drive. We need to get to the cabin and prepare before moonrise." The cabin was dark and silent when they arrived, police tape still crossing the door. Jessica ducked under it without hesitation, heading straight to the loose floorboard where she'd hidden William Wilson's journal before her involuntary hospitalization. "We need to gather these items," she instructed Kyle, showing him a dog-eared page. "Stones arranged in this pattern, iron nails at these specific points, and something that belongs to each family member to create a connection." Kyle looked increasingly uneasy as Jessica gathered children's toys, one of Emma's scarves, and a pocket knife that belonged to Derek. "Jessica," he said hesitantly, "I'm a scientist. I believe in what I can measure and verify, but what you're describing, portals between worlds, entities from another dimension, it contradicts everything we understand about reality." "Science once thought the Earth was flat, Kyle," Jessica reminded him. "Every major scientific breakthrough began with observed phenomena that didn't fit existing models." When the moon reached its zenith, Jessica led Kyle to the stone circle in the forest clearing. She had arranged everything according to William Wilson's detailed instructions, positioning the personal items at specific points within the circle. "The indigenous stories speak of portals that open only during certain moons," Jessica explained, as she carefully traced symbols in the dirt. "It's not magic, Kyle. They're cracks in reality that the ancients understood better than our science." "And if you're wrong, if Derek really did kill them all, then I have nothing more to lose," Jessica responded, positioning herself in the center of the circle. As the full moon reached its highest point, An unnatural wind began to stir the trees surrounding the clearing. Jessica started reciting words from the journal, her voice mixing with the growing whisper of the forest. Kyle watched in fascinated horror as the shadows around the circle seemed to elongate, converging toward the center. "Jessica, stop! This isn't normal!" he shouted as the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. At that moment, a figure emerged from the darkness of the forest. Sheriff Reynolds, his gun drawn and pointed. "Step away from that circle now, Jessica." "You knew all along," Jessica accused, recognizing the fear in his eyes. "You know what happened to them." "My great-grandfather came with Derek's grandfather," Reynolds confessed, his hand trembling. "They made the pact together. My family was spared because his was chosen as the guardian. Please stop this. You don't understand what you're calling forth." Too late. The ground beneath Jessica gave way, revealing not a hole, but a dark void that seemed to absorb all light. Kyle and Reynolds watched in horror as she began to sink slowly, as if gravity had altered its rules. Instead of screaming, Jessica smiled serenely. "I can see them now, all of them. Emma is trying to come back, but the children belong to this place. They always have." Clinical white light assaulted Jessica's senses as she blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the sterile surroundings. The thin mattress beneath her offered little comfort, and the soft restraints around her wrists confirmed her worst fears. She was in a psychiatric ward. Jessica Parker, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, approached her bed. "I'm Dr. Nichols. You're at Pinewood Psychiatric Hospital. Do you understand why you're here?" Jessica remained silent, memories returning in fragmented flashes. The symbols she'd drawn on the cabin wall, the sheriff breaking down the door, but nothing explaining how they'd found her when there had been no way out of that room. "You were brought in 3 days ago," Dr. Nichols continued, unfazed by her silence. "Sheriff Reynolds found you unconscious after you barricaded yourself in the bedroom. You had used something sharp to cut your finger and draw elaborate symbols in your own blood." Jessica glanced at the bandage on her index finger, then returned to staring at the ceiling. "The official diagnosis is acute stress-induced psychosis," Dr. Nichols explained, making notes on his clipboard. "Not uncommon in cases of traumatic loss. We've started you on a regimen of antipsychotics, which should help clarify your thinking." Jessica's eyes drifted to the shadows on the far wall. When no one was looking directly at them, they seemed to move, stretching and contracting like living things. She said nothing. For 3 days, Jessica maintained her silent vigil. She accepted medication without resistance, though she had become adept at hiding the pills under her tongue, spitting them into the toilet when alone. She observed everything: the rotation of nurses, the security protocols, the blind spots in the surveillance system. And most importantly, she watched the shadows that danced across her walls when the staff thought she was sleeping. On the 4th day, Dr. Nichols changed his approach. "Let's talk about Emma," he suggested during their morning session. "I understand you two were quite close growing up." Jessica's eyes flickered toward him, the first acknowledgement she'd given since her arrival. "Your parents died when you were both teenagers. You were what, 17? And Emma was 14? You essentially raised her after that." "She has a strawberry birthmark behind her left ear," Jessica said suddenly, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Shaped like a crescent moon. Only Derek and I know about it." Dr. Nichols leaned forward, clearly pleased to have broken through her silence. "Why is that significant to you right now?" "Because when they find a body they claim is Emma's, I'll know if it's really her." Jessica's gaze was unflinching. "But they won't find bodies, Doctor. They're not dead." "Where do you believe they are, Jessica?" "In between," she whispered, eyes drifting back to the shadows. "In a place that exists alongside ours but follows different rules. Every 33 years the barrier thins." Dr. Nichols made notes without betraying any reaction to her statements. Would you be willing to try hypnosis, Jessica? It might help us access memories that could explain what happened at the cabin. Jessica considered this carefully. Hypnosis might actually reveal something useful, if not to him, then to her. Fine, she agreed. During the hypnosis session that afternoon, Jessica described visions she hadn't consciously remembered. A luminous forest where gravity felt different, trees that communicated through their root systems, and shadowy figures that moved too quickly to clearly see. Have you visited this forest before? Dr. Nichols asked, his voice maintaining the even cadence used in hypnotherapy. No, Jessica responded, her voice distant. But the children are there. They're adapting faster than Emma. Derek has already surrendered to it. Surrendered to what? The transformation. The forest changes you to survive there. The children's eyes are different now. Dr. Nichols ended the session shortly after, visibly disturbed by her descriptions. That evening in the day room, an elderly woman with wispy white hair approached Jessica's table. She glanced nervously at the orderlies before taking a seat. I heard what you said in group therapy, the woman whispered. About the forest that exists alongside ours, about the 33-year cycle. Jessica studied the woman carefully. What do you know about it? They took my grandson in 1978. The old woman's hands trembled as she spoke. We were camping near Wilson Creek. Tommy wandered into the woods while I was cooking breakfast. I heard him laughing, talking to someone. When I called for him, he ran deeper in like he was following something only he could see. Did anyone believe you? Jessica asked, though she already knew the answer. They said I dozed off and he wandered away, drowned in the creek, or was taken by an animal. Tears welled in the woman's rheumy eyes. But I know what I saw. And 3 days before it happened, Tommy kept drawing circles with strange markings inside, just like the ones they say you drew on that cabin wall. Before Jessica could ask more questions, an orderly approached. Mrs. Kellerman needs her medication now, he explained, gently guiding the old woman away. That night, Jessica lay awake, processing this new information. If the old woman was telling the truth, it connected another disappearance to the same area, the same phenomena, at exactly 33 years before the Wilson family vanished. The following morning, Jessica managed to access the patient lounge computer during recreation time. While the nurse was distracted helping another patient, she quickly searched for historical disappearances in the region. Though her time was limited, she found enough to confirm a pattern. Clusters of unexplained disappearances occurred in the area every 33 years, dating back to at least 1880. Dr. Nichols seemed pleased with Jessica's apparent progress during their next session. She had strategically begun to agree that stress and sleep deprivation had affected her judgment. I still believe something happened to Emma and her family, Jessica explained carefully, but I recognize that some of my experiences at the cabin might have been influenced by my emotional state. That's a significant insight, Jessica. Dr. Nichols nodded approvingly. We often experience reality through the filter of our emotional needs. I think I'm ready to be discharged, Jessica suggested. I've been taking the medication, participating in group therapy. I'd like to get back to my life. Let's see how the next few days go, Dr. Nichols hedged. If your progress continues, we can discuss release early next week. That wouldn't be soon enough. Jessica had calculated the lunar cycle and realized the next full moon was in just 2 days. According to William Wilson's journal, the barrier between worlds would be at its thinnest during the full moon. During visiting hours that afternoon, Kyle arrived looking uncomfortable and guilt-ridden. I'm sorry, he began as soon as they were seated in the visitors' lounge. I was just worried about you. The things you were saying, the way you were acting. Jessica leaned forward, speaking in a low, urgent voice. I need you to trust me one last time. There's a full moon tonight. It's our only chance." Kyle's expression shifted from remorse to concern. "Jessica, you need help. This obsession—" "It's not an obsession," she interrupted with a clarity that visibly surprised him. "It's the truth. Think about it. No bodies found, the cabin locked from the inside, the apparitions that surveillance equipment doesn't capture. How do you explain all that rationally?" She could see doubt flickering in Kyle's eyes. Despite his scientific mind, the anomalies in the Wilson case defied conventional explanation. Even if, and that's a massive if, something paranormal is happening, Kyle whispered, "what exactly do you think you can do about it?" The journal explains a ritual for opening the pathway during a full moon. It's not magic, Kyle. It's about identifying where the barrier between worlds is thinnest and creating the right conditions to breach it. Jessica knew framing it in scientific terms would appeal to his analytical mind. "And if you're wrong? If Derek really did kill them all?" "Then I have nothing left to lose," she answered simply. That night, Jessica prepared carefully. She complained of nausea to the evening nurse, who brought her medication and left her to rest. Once alone, Jessica retrieved the lockpick she'd fashioned from a paperclip during craft therapy, waiting patiently for the 2 a.m. shift change. When the ward fell quiet, she skillfully picked the simple lock on her door, a technique she'd learned years ago while researching an article on prison security. Moving silently down the corridor, she used the same technique on the door leading to the staff locker room, where she quickly located street clothes approximately her size. Jessica made her way to the service exit, where Kyle had promised to be waiting. True to his word, his sedan idled in the furthest corner of the parking lot, away from security cameras. "I can't believe I'm doing this," he muttered as she slipped into the passenger seat. "This is a felony, you know." "Only if we get caught," Jessica replied, adrenaline coursing through her system. "Drive. We need to get to the cabin and prepare before moonrise." The cabin was dark and silent when they arrived, police tape still crossing the door. Jessica ducked under it without hesitation, heading straight to the loose floorboard where she'd hidden William Wilson's journal before her hospitalization. "We need to gather these items," she instructed Kyle, showing him a dog-eared page. "Stones arranged in this pattern, iron nails at these specific points, and something that belongs to each family member to create a connection." Kyle looked increasingly uneasy as Jessica gathered children's toys, one of Emma's scarves, and a pocket knife that belonged to Derek. "Jessica," he said hesitantly, "I'm a scientist. I believe in what I can measure and verify. But what you're describing, portals between worlds, entities from another dimension, it contradicts everything we understand about reality." "Science once thought the Earth was flat, Kyle," Jessica reminded him. "Every major scientific breakthrough began with observed phenomena that didn't fit existing models." "I need you to trust me one last time," Jessica whispered, with a clarity that surprised Kyle. "Today is the full moon, the only chance to open the portal again and save Emma before it's too late." Kyle navigated the hospital's service exit corridors with practiced efficiency, guiding Jessica through the labyrinthine hallways while avoiding security cameras. His time installing surveillance systems had given him intimate knowledge of their blind spots. Jessica followed close behind, the borrowed nurse's scrubs providing minimal cover should anyone glimpse them. "Almost there," Kyle whispered as they approached a heavy metal door. "My car's just beyond the employee parking lot." The cool night air hit Jessica's face as they emerged into the darkness, the full moon hanging heavy and luminous above. Kyle's sedan waited in the furthest corner of the lot, exactly where he'd promised. "I still can't believe I'm aiding a psychiatric hospital escape," Kyle muttered as they slipped into the car. He started the engine and pulled away slowly, keeping his headlights off until they reached the main road. "It's not an escape if I'm going back," Jessica replied, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. This is just a temporary medical field trip. Kyle glanced at her, concern evident in his features. You seem different. Clearer somehow. 3 days without their medications will do that, Jessica said. Plus, I've had time to think, to put everything together. The patterns are undeniable, Kyle. They drove in silence for several minutes, the moonlight casting long shadows across the winding country roads. Jessica stared out the window, watching the familiar landscape transform under the silver light. So, what exactly is your plan? Kyle finally asked as they turned onto the Forest Service road leading to the Wilson cabin. We need to recreate the conditions that allowed the portal to open, Jessica explained. According to the journal, the barrier thins during the full moon. The stones in the clearing mark a natural weak point between worlds. And you really believe Emma is trying to come back? Jessica's expression darkened. In my vision through the portal, I saw her. She was fighting against whatever holds them there. The children have adapted, and Derek has surrendered, but Emma is still struggling. The cabin appeared ahead, its dark silhouette standing starkly against the moonlit forest. Yellow police tape crossed the door, fluttering gently in the night breeze. Home sweet home? Jessica murmured as they parked. Inside the cabin, Jessica moved with purpose, locating the loose floorboard where she'd hidden William Wilson's journal before her hospitalization. The leather-bound book remained undisturbed, its pages filled with cryptic diagrams and observations spanning decades. We need these items, she told Kyle, showing him a dog-eared page. Stones arranged in this precise pattern, iron nails at these specific points, and personal belongings from each family member. Kyle's scientific skepticism visibly battled with his loyalty to Jessica as he helped gather the required materials. From the children's room, Jessica collected Lily's hair ribbon, Ethan's favorite marble, and Noah's baseball card. From the master bedroom, she took Emma's silver earrings and Derek's pocket watch. These objects retain energy signatures connected to their owners, Jessica explained, seeing Kyle's doubtful expression. It's not mysticism. It's about quantum entanglement at a level we don't fully understand yet. Kyle checked his equipment bag one last time. I've brought every sensor I could think of: electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, geomagnetic anomaly monitors. If anything unusual happens, we'll document it. The hike to the clearing took 20 minutes, the forest unnaturally still under the full moon. No owls called, no nocturnal creatures rustled in the underbrush. Even the wind had died down, leaving an eerie silence that pressed against their ears. Here, Jessica said as they entered the stone circle. The moss-covered rocks gleamed silver in the moonlight, their ancient carvings more pronounced in the dramatic shadows. Working methodically, Jessica arranged the stones according to the journal's diagram, placing the family members' personal items at specific points within the circle. Kyle set up his equipment around the perimeter, calibrating sensors and positioning cameras to capture every angle. The journal says to wait until the moon reaches its zenith, Jessica explained, checking her watch. That gives us about 20 minutes. Kyle fiddled nervously with his equipment. Jessica, I need to ask, what if this works? What if something comes through? Have you considered the dangers? Of course I have, she replied softly. But Emma doesn't belong there. I have to try. As the appointed time approached, Jessica positioned herself in the center of the circle, reciting the words William Wilson had transcribed from what he claimed were the original inhabitants of the forest. Nothing happened at first. The forest remained silent, the stones inert. Kyle's equipment registered normal readings, and he shot Jessica a sympathetic glance. Then, almost imperceptibly, the wind began to rise. It started as a gentle stirring of leaves, but quickly intensified, circling the clearing in a counterclockwise motion. Kyle's sensors erupted with activity, their digital displays fluctuating wildly. The temperature dropped dramatically, their breath suddenly visible in the cold air. "Jessica, the electromagnetic readings are off the charts," Kyle shouted over the rising wind. "Whatever's happening, it's real." Jessica continued the incantation, her voice growing stronger as the wind whipped around her. The personal items began to vibrate, rising slightly above the ground as if suspended by invisible threads. The moonlight seemed to concentrate within the circle, creating a silvery luminescence that didn't behave like natural light. "It's working," Jessica whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of triumph and fear. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, not violently, but with a strange rhythmic pulsation. The stones in the circle started to glow with a faint blue light, the carved symbols becoming more pronounced. "Jessica, stop," Kyle called out, his scientific mind struggling to process what his instruments were recording. "This isn't normal. The readings suggest some kind of localized gravitational anomaly." Before Jessica could respond, a figure emerged from the darkness of the forest, Sheriff Reynolds, his gun drawn and pointed directly at her. "Step away from that circle now, Jessica," he commanded, his voice tight with fear. "Reynolds?" Kyle turned in shock. "How did you know we'd be here?" "I've been watching the cabin," Reynolds replied, his eyes never leaving Jessica. "I knew she'd try something during the full moon." "You knew all along," Jessica accused, recognition dawning in her eyes. "You know what happened to them." Reynolds' gun hand trembled slightly. "Jessica, you don't understand what you're doing, what you're calling forth." "Then explain it to me," she demanded, refusing to move from the center of the circle. Reynolds' shoulders sagged, the weight of a secret clearly heavy upon him. "My great-grandfather came with Derek's grandfather," he confessed. "They found something in these woods, something not of our world. They made a pact together." "What kind of pact?" Kyle asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "Protection for our community in exchange for guardians, special families who would cross over every 3 generations. Reynolds' voice broke. "My family was spared because the Wilsons were chosen as the primary guardians. I was supposed to ensure no one interfered with the cycle." As Reynolds spoke, the trembling beneath Jessica's feet intensified. The ground began to shift, not cracking open but seeming to lose solidity, becoming translucent like dark water. Jessica felt herself beginning to sink, slowly, as if gravity had altered its rules just for her. "Jessica!" Kyle lunged forward, grabbing her hand as she descended into the void that had formed beneath her. Reynolds dropped his gun and seized Kyle's legs, the 3 forming a human chain between worlds. Instead of panic, an expression of serene wonder spread across Jessica's face as she sank deeper. "I can see them," she whispered. "I can see through to the other side." For a brief, impossible moment, Kyle saw it too. Beyond Jessica stretched an ancient, luminous forest where reality seemed to operate by different rules. Light behaved strangely there, filtering through massive trees unlike any on Earth. In a clearing similar to their own, 3 children played, their movements too fluid to be entirely human. Their laughter echoed across the divide between worlds, hauntingly familiar, yet fundamentally changed. Emma was there too, standing apart, clearly struggling against the enchantment of the place. Her eyes alternated between glazed and lucid, as if 2 personalities battled within her. Derek watched from a distance, his expression a mask of resignation and guilt, his form already beginning to elongate in ways that defied human anatomy. With a tremendous heave, Reynolds pulled backward, dragging Kyle with him, who in turn yanked Jessica from the portal's grasp. The void closed with a thunderous sound that seemed to exist more in their minds than in the air around them, the ground solidifying instantly beneath their feet. The 3 collapsed in a heap, gasping for breath. The stones had stopped glowing, the wind had died, and Kyle's instruments had either shut down or were displaying normal readings once again. Only the full moon overhead remained unchanged, bearing silent witness to what had transpired. Reynolds was the first to speak, his voice hoarse with exertion and emotion. "Now do you understand? This is bigger than any of us. Bigger than one family." Jessica sat up slowly, her eyes different somehow. Deeper, as if they had absorbed something of the other world. "I saw Emma fighting it. She wants to come back." "No one comes back unchanged," Reynolds warned. "The few who managed it in the past, they were never the same." Kyle stared at his equipment in disbelief. "My cameras captured it, all of it. The readings, the visual anomalies. This changes everything we understand about physics, about reality itself." Jessica touched her wrists where the void had made contact with her skin. Faint markings had appeared there, similar to the symbols on the stones, but seemingly embedded beneath her skin rather than drawn upon it. "We need to regroup," she said with newfound determination. "The portal can be opened. We proved that tonight, but we need to be better prepared next time." As they gathered their equipment and began the trek back to the cabin, none of them noticed the shadows among the trees that moved independently of the moonlight, watching their departure with patient, inhuman eyes. While recovering her breath, Jessica looked at Kyle with disturbing certainty. "I saw Emma fighting against the enchantment. Her eyes alternated between glazed and lucid. She's trying to come back, and now I know how to help her." Thunder rumbled in the distance as Jessica, Kyle, and Reynolds stumbled into the cabin, seeking shelter from the sudden downpour that had begun during their trek back from the forest. Jessica's clothes were soaked through, but she shivered not from cold, but from something deeper, a profound chill that had settled into her bones since her partial descent into the void. Reynolds closed the door behind them, his face ashen in the dim light. His hands trembled as he reached for the cabinet above the kitchen sink, retrieving a bottle of whiskey that Derek had kept for special occasions. "I think we all need this," he said, his voice barely audible above the rain pounding against the roof. He poured 3 generous glasses, sliding them across the worn wooden table. Jessica wrapped herself in a blanket she'd found on the couch, her teeth chattering despite the cabin's warmth. The strange markings on her wrists seemed to pulse faintly in the shadows like a distant heartbeat. "No more secrets, Reynolds," she said firmly. "I want to know everything. Now." Reynolds collapsed into a chair, suddenly looking decades older than his 53 years. He stared into his whiskey for a long moment before taking a substantial swallow. "It began in 1887, he started, his voice steadying as he spoke. "My great-grandfather, Thomas Reynolds, and William Wilson were part of a surveying expedition mapping this region." Kyle set up his laptop, downloading the extraordinary data from his equipment while listening intently. They discovered something in the forest, an anomaly, a place where the fabric between worlds had worn thin. Reynolds closed his eyes, reciting from memory what had clearly been passed down through generations. The indigenous people knew of it, had protected it for centuries. They called it the breathing place, where our world exhaled into another. Jessica leaned forward. "What happened?" "Curiosity, greed, the usual human failings." Reynolds grimaced. "William and Thomas conducted experiments, tried to force the portal open using methods they'd learned from reluctant tribal elders. They succeeded, briefly, but something came through." He paused, downing the remainder of his whiskey in one swift motion. "The entities offered protection for the entire region. No natural disasters, bountiful harvests, remarkable health for all residents, in exchange for guardians. Families who would cross over periodically to maintain the balance between worlds." "A protection racket," Kyle muttered, looking up from his computer. "Cosmic extortion." Reynolds nodded grimly. "The pact specified that every 33 years a guardian family would be chosen. The Wilsons were selected as the primary lineage, with my family as observers." record keepers, enforcers when necessary. Jessica studied the documentation Kyle had spread across the table. Historical records of families who had disappeared every 33 years, always under mysterious circumstances, always with no bodies found. So the voices Derek heard, Jessica said, making the connection. They were these entities, calling his family to fulfill the pact. The entities select the most receptive member of the Guardian family, usually someone with a natural sensitivity to the paranormal. They begin the calling months in advance. Reynolds pointed to the psychiatric reports. What Derek experienced as auditory hallucinations were the entities establishing contact. Kyle analyzed the data from his instruments, his scientific skepticism battling with the evidence before him. These readings are unlike anything I've ever seen. The electromagnetic fluctuations alone defy our current understanding of physics. What happens to the families once they cross over? Jessica asked, though she feared she already knew the answer from what she'd glimpsed through the portal. Reynolds spread his hands. From what little we know, the children adapt quickly. The younger the person, the more easily they acclimate to the other side. Adults. His voice trailed off. Adults struggle. Their minds aren't as flexible, their identities too firmly rooted in this reality. Jessica connected the dots, remembering how the twins and Lily had seemed happy, playing in that luminous forest, while Emma fought against whatever influence held sway there. Derek, meanwhile, had already begun to transform, accepting his fate. That explains the message on the window, she whispered. Help Mommy. She doesn't want to come. The children have adapted, but Emma is resisting. Kyle walked to the window, staring out at the storm-lashed forest. Why didn't you tell anyone about this, Reynolds? All these years, all these families. My family was spared, Reynolds said simply, shame evident in his voice. The pact protected them from selection as long as we maintained our role as facilitators. We ensured no one, interfered with the process, kept the records, preserved the knowledge. He looked directly at Jessica. Until you came along and refused to accept their disappearance. As if on cue, Kyle's computer emitted a sharp beep. You need to see this, he called, waving them over. He had finished analyzing the imagery captured by his specialized cameras. The regular video shows nothing unusual, but look at the spectral imaging. On the screen, elongated figures stood at the perimeter of the stone circle, tall, impossibly thin forms with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. The entities were invisible to normal light, but appeared clearly in the spectral wavelengths Kyle's equipment had captured. They were watching us the entire time, Jessica breathed, a chill running through her. She glanced down at the marks on her wrists, which had darkened further. You've been touched by them, Reynolds said, noticing her gaze. The void marked you. You're connected to them now. Jessica recalled the strange sensations she'd experienced since that moment. The feeling of being watched, whispers at the edge of her hearing, shadows that moved contrary to light sources. Is that why I feel like I can sense the portal, even when it's closed, like a compass pointing toward it? Reynolds nodded gravely. Anyone marked by direct contact becomes attuned to the other side. It's why I tried to stop you from entering the circle. The marking is permanent. Kyle continued analyzing his data, correlating multiple sensor readings. I think I've found something, he said after several minutes of intense concentration. There's a pattern to the portal's energy signatures. The openings aren't random. They follow a mathematical progression related to lunar cycles and geomagnetic fluctuations. He pulled up a graph showing spikes of activity over time. Based on historical records in these readings, the portal openings are becoming more frequent and longer in duration. This is unprecedented according to Reynolds' records. Something's changing, Reynolds said, his expression grim. The balance is shifting. Jessica felt a sudden burning sensation on her wrists. She pulled back her sleeves to reveal the markings glowing with a faint blue luminescence. They're here, she whispered. All three turned toward the window, where blue lights flickered between the trees of the forest. The storm had intensified, lightning now striking with unnatural frequency, illuminating the woods in strobing flashes. "We should leave," Reynolds urged, reaching for his jacket. "When they're this active, it's not safe to be so close to the portal zone." Before they could move, a violent convulsion seized Jessica. She collapsed to the floor, her body twisting unnaturally as words in an unfamiliar language poured from her lips. Kyle and Reynolds rushed to her side, but hesitated to touch her as her eyes rolled back, showing only whites. The episode lasted less than a minute, but when Jessica regained consciousness, she seemed different. Her gaze deeper, more knowing, as if she'd glimpsed something fundamental about reality that had altered her perception permanently. "Emma spoke through me," she said, her voice hoarse. "She's fighting, but her resistance is weakening. The longer she stays there, the harder it becomes for her to remember who she was." Later that night, unable to sleep, Kyle found Jessica sitting on the cabin's roof, accessed through a small window in the attic. She stared fixedly at the forest, now calm after the storm, bathed in moonlight. "You should be resting," he said, carefully navigating the slick shingles to sit beside her. "I can hear them," Jessica replied without turning. "Not voices exactly. More like intentions, emotions. They're curious about us, Kyle, about why we're trying to interfere. Can you communicate with them? Ask them to release Emma?" Jessica shook her head slowly. "It doesn't work that way. They don't think like us. Concepts like mercy or family don't translate." She finally turned to him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight oddly. "Emma told me something during the connection. The children have been transformed to adapt to the other side. Bringing them back could kill them." Kyle's scientific mind reeled at the implications. Transformed how? Their molecular structure, their very DNA has been altered to survive in that environment. It's irreversible. Jessica's voice broke. "Emma has been fighting the transformation, but it's killing her. Her human body can't exist there unaltered. But she refuses to surrender, like Derek did." The next morning, Reynolds returned with more historical documents, personal accounts from his ancestors documenting the few instances where someone had returned from the other side. "They all suffered the same fate," he explained grimly, spreading yellowed pages across the table. "Progressive mental deterioration, followed by physical decline. Their bodies couldn't readjust to our reality after beginning the transformation process." "Emma is dying," Jessica said flatly. "She's caught between worlds, unable to fully exist in either." "I'm afraid so," Reynolds confirmed. "Her resistance to the transformation is admirable, but ultimately futile. The longer she fights, the more damage occurs." Kyle had been analyzing samples of the soil from the portal site. "There's something else you should see," he said, gesturing them over to his microscope. "The molecular structure of organic material from the portal zone shows signs of quantum instability, as if it exists partially in another dimensional state." Jessica faced an impossible dilemma. Attempting a rescue mission could save Emma, but might kill the children, whose transformation appeared complete. Leaving them all there condemned Emma to a slow death as her resistance failed. As she struggled with this moral quandary, her phone chimed with a text message notification. The screen showed a number listed simply as unknown. When Jessica opened the message, her breath caught. It contained photos of the children, Ethan, Noah, and Lily, playing happily in the luminous forest she'd glimpsed through the portal. Their eyes reflected light strangely, like black mirrors, but their smiles were genuine. Below the images was a simple message: "Let us stay. Save yourself." While studying the images, Jessica suddenly noticed something in the background. She zoomed in on a distant tree, revealing a dark, elongated figure watching the children, not with menace, but with what almost appeared to be affection. As she showed the images to Kyle and Reynolds, tears streamed down Jessica's face. How can I choose? How can anyone make this choice? Before either man could respond, Jessica's wrists flared with pain, the symbols now burning brightly. Emma's voice, distant yet clear, echoed in her mind. They're coming for you, Jess. For anyone marked by the portal. Run. Emma, with tears streaming from her now completely black eyes, grasped Jessica's hands and whispered, They're coming to claim what belongs to the other side. Not just the children and Derek, but anyone who has been marked by the portal, including you. Jessica hunched over William Wilson's journals, her fingers tracing the faded ink as she worked tirelessly to decipher the patterns of portal openings. The cabin's living room had become a war room of sorts, with Kyle's scientific equipment humming alongside ancient texts and family records. Outside, the forest waited, deceptively peaceful in the morning light. The lunar cycle is key, Jessica muttered, correlating dates from the journals with astronomical charts displayed on her laptop. Wilson documented portal activity intensifying 3 days before and after the full moon, but with specific temporal windows. Kyle nodded, adjusting sensors on his newest monitoring devices. Since witnessing the partial opening of the portal, he'd thrown himself completely into establishing a scientific framework for what they'd experienced. His skepticism had given way to methodical investigation. I've installed remote monitoring equipment at the clearing and in the underground tunnels, he said, checking readings on his tablet. If there's any energetic fluctuation, we'll know immediately. Reynolds had mobilized his most trusted deputies, creating a discreet security perimeter around the forest without revealing the true nature of their surveillance. He'd told them only that they were monitoring for persons of interest in connection with the Wilson family disappearance. My men have been instructed to report any unusual lights or sounds, but to maintain distance from the stone circle, Reynolds explained during his morning visit. We don't need more people getting marked. Jessica unconsciously rubbed the symbols on her wrists, which had darkened to look like intricate tattoos. Since her connection with Emma during the convulsion, the markings occasionally throbbed in unison, as if responding to some distant pulse. That night, Jessica fell into a troubled sleep, her dreams more vivid and disturbing than ever before. She saw her nephews and niece dancing in a spiral pattern beneath trees that towered impossibly high. Their movements were hypnotic, too fluid for human children, and their eyes, completely black, like pools of oil, reflected starlight that came from unfamiliar constellations. Aunt Jessica, they called in unison, their voices overlapping in an unsettling harmony. Don't take us away from our new home. We belong here now. In the dream, Ethan approached her, reaching out with fingers slightly too long, joints too flexible. Mommy is sad because she won't accept the gift, he said, his face serious beyond his years. She needs to let go of what she was. Jessica woke with a start, sweat-soaked and trembling. Dawn light filtered through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. As she tried to calm her racing heart, a profound moral doubt settled over her. Was it right to separate the children from a place where they seemed happy? Was she projecting her own need for family wholeness onto a situation she didn't fully understand? Coffee? Kyle appeared in the doorway, offering a steaming mug. The dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept no better than she had. Thanks. Jessica accepted gratefully, noticing that the markings on her wrists had expanded overnight, the intricate patterns now reaching halfway to her elbows. They're growing, she said quietly. Kyle examined her arms with scientific curiosity. The symbols match the ones from the stone circle, but there are additional elements here I haven't seen before. May I? He took several photos with his phone, then measured the markings with a small ruler. They've expanded approximately 7 millimeters since yesterday. Jessica stared into her coffee. In my dream last night, the children begged me not to take them from their new home. Kyle, what if we're wrong? What if separating them from that place would harm them more than leaving them there? Before Kyle could respond, Reynolds burst through the front door without knocking, his face grim. "We've got a situation," he announced, unfolding a map on the kitchen table. "My wildlife officer reports extreme animal behavior throughout the forest. Deer, foxes, even birds, all moving in concentric patterns toward the stone circle. He said it's like nothing he's ever seen." Kyle's equipment suddenly emitted a series of urgent beeps. He rushed to his laptop, eyes widening at the readings. "Massive energy spikes at the portal site. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating." Jessica felt a pull, like an invisible hook behind her navel drawing her toward the forest. The markings on her arms burned with cold fire. "Emma," she whispered. "She's trying to come through." Night fell with unnatural swiftness. The forest plunged into darkness hours before sunset should have occurred. Jessica, Kyle, and Reynolds gathered there, equipment and weapons, preparing for what felt increasingly like a final confrontation. "Remember the plan," Jessica said as they approached the edge of the woods. "If the portal opens, I'll attempt contact with Emma. Kyle, you monitor the energy readings and alert us if they approach critical levels. Reynolds, your team maintains the perimeter and ensures nothing else comes through." Reynolds distributed earpieces to his small team of 4 deputies, positioned strategically around the forest's edge. "These are linked to Kyle's monitoring system. If he calls for evacuation, you run. No questions, no heroics." As they approached the stone circle, all electronic equipment simultaneously failed. Flashlights, phones, Kyle's sensors all went dead in an instant. In the same moment, blue lights began to dance between the trees, moving with deliberate patterns that hurt the human eye to follow. "It's starting," Jessica breathed, feeling the pull toward the circle intensify to an almost physical drag. The symbols on her arms now glowed with the same eerie blue light as the forest phenomenon. A dense, unnatural fog began forming in the clearing, swirling in a counterclockwise motion around the stone circle. Reynolds and his deputies formed a loose perimeter while Kyle attempted to restart his equipment using backup power sources. Jessica, following her inexplicable inner compass, walked directly toward the center of the fog. Each step felt both wrong and inevitable, as if she were simultaneously being pulled forward and pushed from behind. "Jessica, wait!" Kyle called, but his voice seemed to come from miles away, distorted by the strange acoustics of the fog. The mist parted momentarily as Jessica reached the center of the stone circle. There, shimmering like a heat mirage, a vertical tear in reality pulsed with otherworldly light. Through this narrow aperture, Jessica could glimpse fragmented views of the luminous forest from her vision. And then, emerging from the tear with halting, painful movements, came Emma. Her sister stumbled forward, moving like someone underwater, fighting against invisible currents. Emma's appearance was shocking. Her clothes hung in tatters, her body gaunt, her hair wild and tangled with strange flowers and vines unknown to Earth's botany. Most disturbing were her eyes, which flickered between their natural brown and complete darkness, as if 2 entities fought for control of her body. "Emma!" Jessica rushed forward, catching her sister as she collapsed at the edge of the portal. Emma didn't seem to recognize Jessica at first, her head tilting at an unnatural angle as she studied her face. When she spoke, her voice alternated between her normal tones and something ancient and musical that made the air vibrate strangely. "Jessica," she said, the syllables broken and relearned. "Sister." Reynolds and Kyle approached cautiously, weapons ready in case something else attempted to follow Emma through the portal. "We need to move her away from the circle," Reynolds urged. "The portal could collapse or expand at any moment." Together they carried Emma's surprisingly light form away from the stone circle, the fog swirling angrily around them as if reluctant to release its prize. As they retreated to the edge of the clearing, The portal pulsed violently, then contracted to a pinpoint of light before disappearing entirely. The fog dissipated moments later, leaving the forest in natural darkness once more. Back at the cabin, Emma lay on the couch, drifting in and out of consciousness. When lucid, she spoke in broken phrases about the others and the transformation. When lost to whatever influence still held partial sway over her, she chanted in that musical, alien language that made the shadows in the room seem deeper and more animate. Jessica watched over her sister throughout the night, applying cool compresses to her burning forehead. Emma's skin felt strange to the touch, both familiar and wrong, as if the cellular structure had begun reorganizing itself. "Is she stabilizing?" Kyle asked softly, entering with fresh water and medical supplies. He'd been monitoring Emma's vital signs, which fluctuated between normal human parameters and readings that made no sense for a living organism. "I don't know," Jessica admitted. "Sometimes she seems almost herself, then she slips away again." As dawn approached, Emma opened her eyes fully for the first time. Normal human eyes filled with recognition and fear. "Jessica," she whispered, gripping her sister's hand with surprising strength. "You shouldn't have brought me back. I can't stay here." "We'll find a way to help you," Jessica promised, tears streaming down her face. Emma shook her head weakly. The children. They've been completely changed. Their bodies, their minds. They belong to that place now. Derek surrendered willingly. He knew one of us had to stay human enough to care for them until they fully transformed. "And you fought it," Jessica said, understanding dawning. "You resisted the transformation." "I couldn't bear to lose myself," Emma confessed. "But fighting it is killing me. My body can't exist in either world in this half-state." Outside, the first rays of sunlight breached the horizon. As light touched the windows, Emma turned away in pain, her skin reddening as if burned. "Light hurts her," Kyle observed, quickly drawing the curtains. "Her physiology has already adapted to the other environment." That evening, Reynolds arrived with research materials on previous returnees, the few documented cases of individuals who had come back from the other side throughout history. "None survived more than a few weeks," he said grimly, showing Jessica case files dating back to 1889. "Their bodies couldn't readjust to our reality after beginning the transformation process." Jessica faced the terrible truth. Emma was dying, caught between worlds, unable to fully exist in either. The choice before her seemed impossible. Attempt a rescue of the children that might kill them, or accept the separation and focus on helping Emma in whatever time she had left. That night, Jessica found Emma on the cabin's roof, staring fixedly at the forest beneath the stars. "How did you get up here?" Jessica asked, carefully navigating the slick shingles. "I felt called," Emma said simply, her eyes reflecting starlight too brightly. "They're watching us, waiting." "The children?" Emma nodded. "They want me to return to complete the transformation. They don't understand why I resist." She turned to Jessica, tears flowing from eyes that now flickered between human and otherworldly. "I've seen what I would become, Jess. Part of me wants it. The freedom, the connection to everything. But I'd lose myself completely." As they sat in silence, Jessica's phone chimed with a message. The screen displayed unknown number, and when she opened it, her heart stopped. Photos showed the children playing beneath massive trees, their faces joyful despite their unnaturally black eyes. The message below read simply, "Leaving them is kindness. Saving you is love." While studying the images, Jessica noticed a dark figure standing in the background, watching the children with unmistakable protectiveness. Despite its distorted proportions, too tall, too thin, with limbs jointed wrong, the stance was achingly familiar. Derek. During the night, Jessica woke to the sound of Emma speaking in the next room. Approaching cautiously, she heard her sister's voice, not delirious or dreaming, but conversing fluently with someone who answered in childish voices, while an elongated, inhuman shadow stretched across the wall. Jessica confronted Emma in the kitchen the next morning, her coffee untouched as she studied her sister's face in the harsh light. Emma's appearance seemed to shift subtly, depending on the angle, sometimes looking like the pediatrician she'd been, other moments revealing something profoundly alien beneath the familiar features. "Who were you talking to last night?" Jessica asked directly. "I heard voices in your room." Emma's eyes darted toward the window, then back to Jessica. Her expression cycled rapidly between confusion and clarity. "I don't remember any conversation," she said, her voice unnaturally melodic on certain syllables. "I was sleeping." Jessica placed her phone on the table, playing the audio recording she'd made through the wall. Children's voices, interspersed with Emma speaking in that strange musical language, filled the kitchen. Emma's face contorted in distress. I can't control when they reach through. The children, they call to me." She pressed her palms against her temples. "It's getting harder to tell which thoughts are mine and which are theirs." Kyle entered, carrying medical equipment. He'd been monitoring Emma's vital signs since her return, documenting anomalies that defied conventional medicine. "Your blood work came back," he said grimly. "The cellular structure is continuing to alter. Your DNA shows markers I can't even identify." Reynolds arrived shortly after with 3 doctors from different specialties, all sworn to secrecy. They examined Emma with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. "I've never seen anything like this," the neurologist admitted, reviewing Emma's brain scans. "These patterns of activity exist in regions that should be physiologically impossible." "Her blood composition contains elements not on the periodic table," the hematologist added, thoroughly disturbed. "The molecular structures are shifting even as we examine them." In a moment of clarity, Emma grasped Jessica's hand with surprising strength. "I need to show you," she whispered urgently, "while I still can." She led Jessica to the bathroom, closing the door behind them. With trembling fingers, Emma unbuttoned her shirt and turned. Jessica gasped. Spreading across Emma's back were what appeared to be dark, intricate patterns, similar to the markings on Jessica's wrists but far more extensive. As Jessica watched, they seemed to move subtly, like ink swirling beneath the skin. "This is the transformation," Emma explained, her voice breaking. "It begins as markings, then alters everything: organs, bones, perception." Derek accepted it completely. The children adapted naturally. She rebuttoned her shirt with clumsy fingers. "I've been fighting it since the beginning." "Can it be reversed?" Jessica asked, already fearing the answer. Emma shook her head. "Fighting it only prolongs the suffering. Reynolds is right. No one returns unchanged." Later that day, Jessica spread the family photos across the kitchen table. "Do you recognize them?" she asked gently, watching Emma's reactions carefully. Emma's fingers trembled as she touched each image. When she reached the twins' school portraits, her eyes darkened completely for a moment before returning to normal. "Ethan." "Noah," she said, the name sounding both cherished and foreign on her tongue. She moved to Lily's photo, tears streaming down her face. "My baby." She was so afraid at first, but then she adapted the fastest. "They seem happy in the messages they've sent," Jessica offered cautiously. "They are," Emma whispered. "That world, it's not evil, Jessica. It's just different. Life exists there in forms we can't comprehend. The children are thriving in ways they never could here." Jessica showed Emma the photos that had been sent to her phone, the children playing beneath towering trees, their black eyes reflecting stars from another cosmos. "And Derek?" Emma's expression turned complicated. "He surrendered completely. He understood the pact before I did. That one parent needed to guide the children through the transformation. I was supposed to return to this world as messenger, to prepare the next family. But I couldn't bear to leave them. I couldn't fulfill my role. Reynolds returned that evening with historical records of other returnees. Yellowed papers and microfiche printouts detailing the few documented cases of those who had come back. Amanda Wilson, 1921, he read from the medical examiner's report. Returned after 3 weeks beyond the portal. Progressive neural degeneration, followed by complete organ failure. Death occurred 17 days after return. He placed another file on the table. James Wilson, 1856, found wandering the forest, speaking an unidentified language, committed to asylum after violent episodes, deceased within 1 month. Autopsy noted profound and inexplicable anatomical anomalies. Kyle, analyzing the patterns, looked up grimly. Based on these cases and Emma's current progression, I estimate she has 2 weeks at most before critical systems fail. Emma nodded, unsurprised. I can feel it happening. My human form is breaking down while the other form remains incomplete. I exist in neither world fully. That night, Kyle found Jessica on the porch, staring into the forest with bloodshot eyes. You need to sleep, he said gently, sitting beside her. How can I? She responded, her voice hollow. I'm facing an impossible choice. Attempt a rescue that might kill the children, or accept that they're gone forever, and focus on helping Emma in whatever time she has left. What does Emma want? Jessica was silent for a long moment. She wants the children to stay where they're thriving. She believes attempting to bring them back would be cruel. Their transformation is complete. Her voice broke. But she's suffering, Kyle, caught between worlds, dying by inches. Kyle placed his hand over Jessica's, noticing how the symbols on her wrists seemed to pulse in the moonlight. And what about you? The markings are spreading. Jessica pulled back her sleeves, revealing that the patterns now extended nearly to her shoulders, intricate whorls and symbols that matched those in the stone circle. I can feel them watching me through these marks. They're curious, patient. The following morning, Emma experienced a violent seizure, her body contorting in ways that defied human anatomy. She spoke rapidly in the alien language while her eyes cycled between human and obsidian darkness. Jessica and Kyle struggled to hold her down as Reynolds called for medical assistance. When the seizure finally subsided, Emma lay exhausted on the couch, but her gaze was the clearest it had been since her return. I received a message, she whispered, her voice hoarse. They're opening the portal again during the dark moon, a time for journeys to end. She grasped Jessica's marked arm. You have to help me get back, Jess. I can't die halfway between worlds. If you go back, you'll complete the transformation, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. You'll lose yourself entirely. I'm already lost, Emma replied with tragic clarity. At least there, I can be with my children. That evening, while Emma slept fitfully under mild sedation, Kyle discovered something alarming in his analysis of Jessica's markings. They're not just spreading, he explained, showing microscopic images on his laptop. They're altering your cellular structure at the quantum level, similar to Emma's transformation, but slower, more controlled. He looked up, his scientific detachment wavering. Jessica, I think they're preparing you too. Reynolds confirmed this fear when he returned with even older texts, fragile papers preserved from the original pact. Anyone marked by direct contact becomes a potential vessel, he translated from the archaic text. If the primary guardian fails, the marked one shall complete the cycle. They're preparing me as Emma's replacement, Jessica realized with growing horror. If she dies without returning, I'm meant to take her place. Emma seemed unsurprised when told of this discovery. I felt it when we connected through the markings, she admitted. They consider you eligible. Family blood, unmarried, no children of your own. This isn't your decision to make, Jessica insisted, clasping her sister's hands. "We'll find another way." Emma smiled sadly. "There is no other way. The pact requires balance. A guardian must remain to complete the cycle." Her expression became distant, otherworldly. "The children need someone, if not me, then you." That night, Jessica found Emma on the roof again, staring at the stars with an expression of longing. Jessica carefully sat beside her, noticing how her sister's skin seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight, as if partially transparent. "Do you remember when we used to camp in the backyard as kids?" Jessica asked softly. "You were always afraid of the dark until I made up stories about the stars being nightlights for angels." Emma's laugh sounded almost normal. "I remember." She turned to Jessica, her eyes fully human in this moment of connection. "I'm not afraid anymore, Jess. Part of me wants to complete the journey, to understand what I've only glimpsed." She took Jessica's hand, examining the markings. "But I couldn't bear the thought of you being forced to follow." "No one's forcing anything," Jessica reassured her, though the markings pulsed as if in disagreement. As dawn approached, Emma's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her temperature fluctuated wildly, her heartbeat becoming arrhythmic. During a moment of lucidity, she made Jessica promise to deliver a message to the children if she couldn't return, that she loved them, beyond worlds, beyond transformation, beyond understanding. While the doctors worked to stabilize Emma, Jessica's phone chimed with another message from the unknown number. It contained a single image, the three children standing before what appeared to be a doorway formed between two massive trees, their expressions solemn yet expectant. The text below read, "The door opens at midnight. Final chance, choose wisely." Emma, with tears streaming from her eyes now completely black, grasped Jessica's hands and whispered, "They're coming to claim what belongs to the other side. Not just the children and Derek, but anyone who has been marked by the portal, including you." Jessica stared at the markings on her wrists, watching as they pulsed with an otherworldly blue light that seemed to brighten with each passing minute. The intricate patterns had spread rapidly overnight, the symbols now extending past her elbows and beginning to curl around her shoulders like some ancient, living tattoo. Emma lay on the makeshift bed in the living room, her breathing shallow and irregular, caught in the half-transformation that was slowly killing her. "The markings are accelerating their spread," Kyle observed, measuring the patterns with calipers. "At this rate, they'll cover your entire upper body by nightfall." Reynolds stood by the window, watching the forest with wary eyes. The trees seemed unnaturally still, as if holding their breath in anticipation. No birds sang, no wind stirred the leaves. The silence was absolute and profoundly unsettling. "We're running out of time," Jessica said, her voice steady despite the fear churning inside her. "Emma won't survive another day in this state." Kyle's monitoring equipment suddenly emitted a series of urgent beeps. He rushed to his laptop, eyes widening at the readings. "Massive energy fluctuations at the portal site. The readings are off the charts, higher than anything we've recorded so far." Jessica felt the pull immediately, like an invisible hook behind her navel drawing her toward the forest. The markings on her arms burned cold, responding to whatever force was gathering strength beyond the tree line. "They're coming," Emma whispered, her eyes fluttering open, completely black now, reflecting nothing. "The door is opening for the final time." Reynolds retrieved an ancient leather-bound book from his truck, the cover worn and cracked with age. "My grandfather translated this from the original documents. There is a ritual to seal the portal permanently," he explained, carefully turning brittle pages. "It's been attempted only once before in 1922. "What happened?" Kyle asked. Reynolds' expression darkened. 5 men died. The ritual failed." He pointed to a complex diagram showing the stone circle with additional symbols drawn around it. "It requires a significant sacrifice. blood freely given by someone connected to both worlds. Someone marked, Jessica realized, looking at her arms. The theory was that sealing the portal would free those trapped on the other side, returning them to our world. Reynolds continued. But the attempt was incomplete, the sacrifice insufficient. Outside, thunder rumbled across a cloudless sky. The unnatural sound sent vibrations through the cabin, rattling windows and dishes. Emma's body arched in response, a pained gasp escaping her lips. "We need to decide now," Kyle urged, checking Emma's vital signs, which were becoming increasingly erratic. "Based on these readings, the portal is gathering energy for something unprecedented." Jessica knelt beside her sister, taking Emma's cold hand in hers. "Emma, can you hear me? We found a way to close the portal, to bring you all home." Emma's obsidian eyes fixed on Jessica with terrible clarity. "Leave them," she pleaded, her voice resonating with harmonics that hurt the human ear. "The children belong to that world now. Bringing them back would destroy them." Tears of something darker than water traced paths down her hollow cheeks. "Let them go, Jessica. Save me." The moral weight of the choice pressed down on Jessica like a physical force. Was it right to attempt a rescue that might kill the children who had fully adapted to their new reality? Or should she accept their transformation and focus on saving Emma alone? As night approached, Jessica ventured alone to the edge of the forest, seeking clarity in the last place she expected to find it. Standing where the yard met the wild, she closed her eyes, allowing the connection through her, markings to open fully for the first time. Immediately she was flooded with impressions, not thoughts or words, but pure sensation. She saw Derek, transformed but recognizable, serene in his new existence. He moved through the luminous forest with fluid grace, watching over the children with what could only be described as love, despite his altered state. "I understand now," Jessica whispered to the silent trees. "You didn't take them. They became part of you." Returning to the cabin, Jessica found Kyle and Reynolds preparing for the ritual, gathering iron spikes, salt, and other materials listed in the ancient text. Emma had been moved to a stretcher, ready to be transported to the stone circle. "I've made my decision," Jessica announced, her voice steady with newfound conviction. "We won't attempt to close the portal or bring the children back." "What?" Reynolds looked up sharply. "This might be our only chance to—" "To what?" Jessica interrupted. "To force children who have successfully adapted to a new existence back into bodies that no longer fit them? To destroy the balance between worlds that has existed for centuries?" She shook her head firmly. "The children belong there now. They're happy, healthy, transformed. Emma is the only one caught between worlds, suffering." "So what do you suggest?" Kyle asked, setting down the materials he'd been gathering. "We use the energy of the opening portal not to close it or force everyone back, but to stabilize it, to create a safe passage for Emma to return and complete her transformation." Reynolds looked skeptical. "And what about you? The markings are claiming you as the next guardian." Jessica touched the symbols that now covered most of her upper body. "I'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, Emma needs our help." As the moon rose, a perfect black disk in the new moon sky, they carried Emma to the stone circle. The air in the clearing vibrated with potential energy, the stones gleaming with an inner light that cast no shadows. Kyle set up his equipment around the perimeter, while Reynolds placed protective symbols of iron and salt around their position. Jessica helped Emma to the center of the circle, where the energy was strongest. Her sister's body felt unnaturally light, as if already half departed from the physical world. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Jessica asked, searching for any hesitation in Emma's alien eyes. Emma nodded, a smile of relief transforming her gaunt features. "I want to be whole again, one way or another. I want to be with my children." The air began to thicken and distort as midnight approached. Strange lights danced between the trees surrounding the clearing, and the ground beneath their feet pulsed like a living heart. Kyle's equipment registered readings so extreme that several sensors simply shut down, unable to quantify what they detected. Jessica positioned herself opposite Emma, their hands linked across the center of the circle. The markings on Jessica's skin now glowed brilliantly, responding to the gathering energy. Instead of fighting the connection as she had before, Jessica opened herself to it, allowing the strange force to flow through her and into the circle. "It's working," Kyle called out, watching his remaining instruments. "The portal is stabilizing." Between Jessica and Emma, the air split open like a vertical tear in reality. Through this widening aperture, Jessica could see the luminous forest of the other world, its beauty both alien and oddly familiar. 3 small figures stood on the other side, Ethan, Noah, and Lily, waiting with solemn expectation, their transformed eyes reflecting stars from another cosmos. Emma turned toward the opening, her expression one of painful longing. "My babies," she whispered. Behind the children stood Derek, his form elongated and changed, but his protective stance unmistakable. He raised a hand in greeting or farewell. Jessica couldn't tell which. "Go to them," Jessica urged, fighting back tears. "Be whole again." Emma hesitated, looking back at her sister. "The markings, they'll call you next. You'll be forced to follow." Jessica nodded in understanding. "Perhaps someday, but not today. Today is about your choice, your journey." With a final squeeze of Jessica's hands, Emma turned and stepped toward the portal. As she approached the threshold, her body began to change visibly, the painful half-transformation accelerating, her form shifting to match the requirements of the other world. When she crossed through, the change completed in a flash of blue light. On the other side, Emma embraced her children, her movements now fluid and natural, her eyes the same obsidian pools as theirs. The portal began to fluctuate wildly, the edges of the tear becoming unstable. Kyle shouted a warning as his last functioning instruments registered a critical energy surge. "It's collapsing," Reynolds called out, grabbing Jessica's shoulder. "We need to withdraw immediately." Jessica stood transfixed, watching as Emma and the children retreated deeper into the luminous forest, hand in hand. Just before they disappeared from view, Emma turned back. Across the dimensional divide, their eyes met one last time. "Thank you," Emma's voice whispered directly into Jessica's mind. "For letting us go." The portal snapped closed with a thunderous sound that seemed to exist more in their minds than in the air around them. The stone stopped glowing, the strange lights vanished, and the forest returned to its normal state, or what passed for normal after everything they had experienced. 6 months later, Kyle visited Jessica at her new home, a small cabin she had built near the edge of the forest, close enough to feel its presence, but not so close as to be consumed by it. The markings on her arms had neither faded nor spread further, settling into a state of quiet dormancy. "I've been developing this," Kyle said, showing her a new device that resembled a sophisticated compass. "It detects geomagnetic anomalies with precision down to the quantum level. Thought it might help with your research." Jessica smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "My research?" "Monitoring the portal," Kyle clarified, setting the device on her kitchen table. "For when it activates again, so we can be prepared next time." "There won't be a next time," Jessica said, touching the markings on her wrist thoughtfully. "Not for a while, at least. The cycle has changed." Kyle studied her face, noting the subtle alterations that most would miss, the slightly too perfect stillness when she wasn't actively remembering to fidget, the occasional too fluid movement. "How can you be sure?" Jessica looked out her window toward the forest, her expression serene. "Because Emma succeeded, she's almost free of the enchantment now." That night, after Kyle had left, Jessica sat on her porch, watching the trees sway in the gentle breeze. Sometimes, if the light was just right and she unfocused her eyes in a particular way, she could almost see the luminous forest overlaid on the mundane one, a glimpse of the world where her family now thrived. She felt no regret for her choice, only a sense of peace that had been absent in the frantic months of searching. Different worlds could coexist without destroying each other. Different forms of life could find their proper places in the cosmos. Her phone chimed with a message notification. No number displayed, just a single image. Emma and the children beneath an impossibly tall tree, their transformed faces joyful and complete. A sixth figure, partially visible in the background, held what appeared to be an antique camera, capturing the family reunion for posterity.